B5 or actually B6, and we have a request to address the board by Ernest Craven-Neeley. Yes. Welcome, Mr. Craven-Neeley.
Thank you very much. My name is Ernest Craven-Neeley. This is my husband, Robbie Craven-Neeley. He's going to help me out. Just be up here for support. I'm an educator. I've been an educator in California for 25 years, most of those in Modesto City Schools. Thank you for letting me address you tonight. I'm gay, if you haven't figured that out yet. Here, I'm concerned about the LGBT youth in Modesto. Here's some statistics from Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Not good stuff. LGBT teens are more likely to experience all this stuff here. This suicide attempts, suicide in itself, physical violence, depression, homelessness, drug use, high dropout rates, absenteeism, harassment in schools. And I'd like to encourage you board members and administrators, if you haven't done this already, do your own investigating. Talk to the GSA advisors, offer to do a question and answer session, listening to the youth, talk to the counselors that go into our high schools and junior high schools. And unfortunately, you'll probably find that these statistics are true. And all of these are due to negative stigmatization in the schools to LGBT. What can be done? LEAs can do a lot of different things. I'd like to focus on making our history and our sex education more integrated. So prior to the 1960s and 1970s, if you would have looked at textbooks in California, you would have seen mostly white people and Anglo-Saxon names, John, Mary, Sue, and then our state made a movement to be more inclusive to races. Today, I believe our laws are going a step further and trying to be more inclusive to LGBT people. We are 5% of the population at least, if not more. We're not invisible, and unfortunately, a lot of our curriculum has censored us out of it. We're not recognized in the sex education courses. We're not recognized in history. So we have some new laws that address that, and I think Modesto City Schools, like a lot of districts, are moving very slowly, and I don't think it's fair to the LGBT population. So here's the 2012 Fair Education Act. Notice the year, 2012. It came with 5 education codes. 3 of them had to do with the adoption processes, so which confuses things because the adoption process in California has been stalled. We're years behind in our adoption process, but there are some education codes like this one that have nothing to do with the adoption process. And this one says, instruction in the social sciences shall include the contributions of these groups that have been left out: lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and persons with disabilities. Next slide. Here's a slide from the Department of Education. This is from the question and answer page for the Fair Education Act, and it recognizes number 3. When does the law take effect? January 2012. Now, down below on number 4, this is what I would consider a disservice to LGBT people. The Department of Education said it's up to the local districts to determine how the instructional content is included. In my opinion, unfortunately, a lot of school districts have decided that that is interpreted. It's up to the school district to determine whether or not to implement the curriculum, and that is not what it says. Next slide. So when this legislation came out, I call it two-pronged because school districts had a choice. They could go one of two ways. They could have implemented it right away, and some progressive school districts did, and I think that was fair to LGBT people, like San Francisco and some near LA. The other road that districts could have taken was to wait, and I think that was very unfair because the adoption process in the state has been prolonged and stalled for years. So that means LGBT people have had to wait extra years to be recognized in our curriculum. Now, it started in 2012. I have the numbers up there. These are all the LGBT people in all of our high schools, at least 5%, that have been denied this law, this curriculum. The LGBT students of 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19. I've been in dialogue with Marla Mack regarding this. She says, we're hoping to have that here in Modesto implemented in the 2019-2020 school year. And yet it was enacted in January of 2012. Next slide. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Can we go back slide? It's a lot like these wheelchair accessible laws where some building owners can get around the law. They can say, well, my building was built before a certain year, therefore I don't have to make it wheelchair accessible. That's great for the building owner. They don't have to spend the time or the money to renovate their building. It's terrible for the person in the wheelchair. That's similar to what's happening with this curriculum. LEAs, busy administrators can say, hey, we don't have to adopt this. We can wait until the state requires us to adopt this curriculum. That's great news for busy administrators. You don't have to deal with the controversy of the content. It's terrible for the LGBT people because they are denied access to the curriculum. No built-up self-esteem, no deterrence to harassment, none of those Center for Disease Control statistics being taken care of. Okay, now we're ready for the next slide. Here's Nancy McGee. She's the San Mateo County Office of Education Associate Superintendent for Student Services. She says, educators have not done enough to implement the Fair Education Act. Kids should see themselves reflected in the curriculum. They should see their identities and the kinds of history we are teaching. I spoke with her on the phone 2 Saturdays ago. First thing that came out of her mouth, she said, these guidelines should have been implemented in 2012. By the way, she goes to school districts in her county, and she does the same thing that I'm doing tonight. She sent me one of her presentations. This was one of her, similar to one of her slides. Here's a sad story. Ronan Shimizu, 12 years old, Folsom Cordova School District, teased for being the only boy cheerleader, for designing his own clothes, which I think is great that he did that. He was teased, called gay, girly, fag. Now what? And then he took his own life. Now what if that school district had implemented teaching about negative aspects of stereotyping, like the California Healthy Youth Act says to do, or gave examples of gay people who contribute to our society, like fashion designers, Carlo Otto Lagerfeld? Maybe he would be here today. By the way, James Stewart and George Bush were both male cheerleaders, not gay. Okay, next slide. Now here's the Department of Education from their website. Must LEAs use only state-adopted instructional materials? They say no. C, if a LEA chooses to use instructional materials that have not been adopted, all they have to do is form a social content review committee. I met with Kim Newton in January 2016. I said, Ms. Newton, why don't we do this? She didn't give me a reason why. She said, no, we're going to wait for the framework to be adopted. 7 months later, the framework was adopted. Here's the framework. Next slide. Framework, July 2016, says current evidence indicates some groups of students experience a low level of safety, just like the Center for Disease Control says. And then it lists the groups, and sexual orientation is under them. And then it goes on to say teachers can fill gaps found in the curriculum by adding relevant examples of diversity beyond the content standards. So in my opinion, this is the spirit of the law. Waiting for textbook to be adopted, that's the letter of the law. 2012, we're still waiting for the adoption process. But this is a framework that was adopted in 2016. This is the spirit of the law. And it goes on to say supplemental materials. And then it says right down the bottom, it's important for students to see examples of members from their own gender and sexual orientation. We could do things like this. Bayard Rustin, civil rights leader, gay rights leader, worked alongside Martin Luther King. He was extorted to step down. Some of the leaders didn't like that he was gay. They said they were going to start false rumors if he didn't step down. He stepped down. He was asked to rejoin the movement. He became the chief organizer for the March for Washington for Jobs and Freedom, the famous I Have a Dream speech rally. He was the lead organizer. So things like that. I mean, what would it hurt our students to learn about gay people who contributed like that? So that moves on to the California Healthy Youth Act. Basically, this says you don't have to teach sex education, but if you do, you have to recognize all sexual orientations. So in my classroom, I like to be able to say something like this. Boys and girls, the videos we're watching say that at a certain time you're going to experience an attraction to the opposite gender. For some of you, research shows you might experience attraction to your own gender. For guys, we call it being gay. For girls, we call it being a lesbian. If that's you, I want you to know, don't panic. Nothing bad or weird is happening to you. You're not bad. And if that's not you, and later you find that's your classmate, your coworker, Modesto City Schools policy is that we show respect to everyone, regardless of their sexual orientation. I mean, that would be recognizing all sexual orientations. So this is what I'm asking for the board and the administration to consider doing. The board, just tonight, if you could give us your stance on these issues. If we could authorize teachers to recognize the framework, again, that's the spirit of the law. We don't have to wait for the adoption process, to recognize all sexual orientations, especially in grades 5 and 6, with an opt-out, to give educational updates to parents. So parents, once in a while, I'll teach on Bayard Rustin or people like that, and usually my parents are okay. Once in a while, they're confused because there are no educational updates going to the parents saying, we have new laws, we have new framework. By the way, sometimes people say, well, Mr. Craven has an agenda. You know, I have one agenda when I teach something like Bayard Rustin. That's to destigmatize the child in my classroom who's feeling different, who's trying to figure out why he doesn't fit in, why he doesn't get along with the other people his gender, and he's confused or she's confused. I want to raise their self-esteem and deter the harassment that goes on in his or her life. This is my closing. Here are society's traditional negative views on LGBT people, and they're not true. So society has often said LGBT people are criminals. We're not. They've said we're perverts. We're not. They've said we're mentally ill. We're not. They've said we're sinners. We're not. So what is NCS's stance toward LGBT people and the rights to see themselves in the curriculum as the law states? Are the words gay, homosexual, lesbian, bisexual, transgender viewed as bad and dirty and Modesto? If not, why are we not implementing Fair Education Act and recognizing the framework in the California Healthy Youth Act? 3-second story. I had a African-American grandparent of a student of mine come to my class a couple of years ago talking about being raised in the South. I think it was Mississippi. And he said it was either state or federal, came and told his town leaders they had to integrate the swimming pool. And they chose, instead of having the white swim with the black people, they chose to bury the swimming pool and they turned it into a tennis court. If we don't think that these words are bad and I'm gay, I'm not bad, then why aren't we implementing these things? And the question again that I leave to you, what is your stance on those issues? I don't know if we can back
Mr.
a slide.
Craven-Neeley, your time has expired for
Yeah.
this evening, but we really appreciate you coming.
I just finished.
Wrap it up. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Craven-Neeley? Yes, our student representative to the board.
I'd like to know what specifics would you like the board to do as far as implementing LGBT curriculum?
I think just getting the rhetoric started, letting teachers know it's okay. Say, put the word out. We want you to recognize the framework. We want you to highlight examples of people from the gay community. Just like this, we want you to recognize all sexual orientations in your grades 5 and 6 and give a statement like I gave. This is what we'd like you to say in your classrooms to your students. And then give educational updates to parents, like in the conduct code next year. Here's what you might hear in your child's classroom because we have a new framework. We have new laws that are coming, like the Healthy Youth Act, Fair Education Act.
Are there any comments from the public? Ms. Barrera.
Debbie Barrera, we are La Raza Parents Union. I have some questions for you, sir.
Ms. Barrera, the
Oh,
questions have to be
okay.
addressed to the board.
Okay.
You're used to this.
I
Thank
know,
you so much for
it's-
following that protocol.
I'm going to USA right now because I'm actually representing a family over at Garrison right now. She's actually one of my ambassadors. She's actually brought forth valid complaints on this very issue that parents were not notified on what was being taught in that classroom. There's 5 parents to be exact. So I'd like to know from all the board members who represents Garrison. What board member sits in that area? Can I see the hand? I want to know who sits on the seat right now that's under the Garrison umbrella.
Well, there are a number
Because
of
I'd
us-
like to dialogue with that certain district.
I understand what you
board.
mean. But
Yeah.
there's still a few of us that are elected at large. That would
Are
be
still elected? Okay, then I
Yeah,
will.
we're
I
elected at
will
large.
personally speak with you guys on this issue because it's a twofold here, and parents are not satisfied with, first of all, teachers that don't give their lesson plans to administration. This would be a prime example. So I have 5 families, and the core of the families that I represent that are not happy happen to be the parents that come from state and federal prisons. And so there's a big issue here. And so I don't want to, I mean, I can publicly announce it, but I'd like to sit behind closed doors and see how we can all collaborate and work together under this issue. I'm still waiting since 2012 on the AB 9Zets law. I've been asking Stephen, when are we going to adopt that? When are we? And so, you know, there's still a lot of pending in the pipeline that legislation hasn't even approved. So, I mean, I'm just here to be the bearer of bad news for our parents that are not satisfied with the document that's being taught in that classroom. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Barrera. Anyone else in the public? Yes. Good evening.
Hi, I'm Reverend Michael Schiffelbein, and I'm the pastor of College Avenue United Church of Christ and the president of the Stanislaus County Interfaith Council. And I just speaking from the faith community, with hearing so many stories from young people who come to me, young people who have been close to suicide, needing to know that they're of value, needing to know that they're a part of history. It makes a huge difference. It makes such a difference in the life of young people to hear that kind of respect and being brought forth from in their own schools. So I just want to just speak from that point of view, from the point of view of hearing young people come to me and talking to me at church and outside in the community, how important it is. So I want to really be an advocate for implementing the curriculum.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm short. I wasn't planning on speaking, but I feel that I need to. My name is Robin Fowler-Lorenco, and I am a retired school teacher from Ceres Unified, and I am also the mother of a gay son. I also volunteer at the Central Valley Pride Center. I was asked by Mr., say your whole last name? Craven-Neeley, to come and support him tonight. I do have to say that I totally support what he's asking for, both from a teacher's point of view, because I have had gay students. I was honored to be asked by a student I taught in the 5th grade when he was in high school to please come and meet with him and his family so he could come out to his family. I was very honored to be asked to do that because I know the ridicule and the struggles he went through. I have a former student who did commit suicide in the 8th grade. My son was accepted by his family, which was wonderful, and he only told me of a few times he was bullied and a few times that things were said that he felt he was singled out in class. I have to say, as an educator, I've always been supportive of my students. And as a mom, I have made a point, and as a teacher of gay students, I have made a point of always, if somebody fits the situation, I throw them in. And I have never had a parent come and complain to me about that. Please consider.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ms.
Gladys Williams,
welcome.
NAACP. You know, if one of us does not have their freedom, we all have lost our freedom. These are not unreasonable requests. I recommend that a committee be developed to find out how we're going to approach this discussion, because it is a discussion that needs to be appropriately approached We also need to let parents know what is going on so that they have the right to opt out if they choose to opt out. But bottom line, we're in the 21st century and we're all citizens and we all want to be recognized as human beings, and we have to be respectful of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public? Yes. Good evening.
Hi, good evening. I'm Robbie Ernest Craven-Neeley. I share my middle name with my husband's first name. I want to thank you very much for your time this evening listening to my husband's presentation. We have elected you, the school board, to look out for the best interests of the children in the community. And those children may grow up to be LGBT, or they may work with LGBT people. And to have the most educated, secure, comfortable, upstanding citizens in our community, they have to be able to work with LGBT coworkers. They may have families and kids themselves in the future. At this growing stage of their education, elementary school, junior high, and high school, it's imperative that they have a full education, which includes the human condition, LGBT included. And I thank you very much for your time. We've elected you leaders and administrators, and we look to you to lead on this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, then we come back to the board, and Ms. Mack was going to make a statement on behalf of the district.
We disagree with points made in the presentation tonight. We will bring back a presentation to address the items shared in this presentation.
Thank you. There are no further comments, and this is not an. Oh. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna go fishing with our board rep because I have children, in, as well as you do, in high school, and sort of looking at the question you asked. My perception from my daughters is that we don't really have a bullying, oppression, sort of abuse problem with individuals because of this issue, that they're all aware and they really are getting along. And that generally speaking, if there's an issue, it's 2 or 3 issues that may be one thing, but our students are aware of these issues and do very well together compared to those of us who grew up 40 years ago, if I'm making sense.
You are absolutely. The only thing I will say is most students do not have any curriculum that does deal with LGBT. I know in certain AP classes, I know like 2 weeks ago in Gov, we did address gay rights. And mainly because in AP Gov, you do have to cover that for the test since it's current events. But in all my other classes, I've never touched on it. You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for your input. All right, this is not an action item, so it's only just a request to address the board. So we're moving on to item B7, approval of resolution number